Leading a startup team? Whether you're delivering a sugar rush, stocking coffee, or getting a regular delivery of snacks, Office Depot has solutions that fit every startup culture, from getting those first business cards and stationery to ordering fleece pullovers with your new logo. To learn how Office Depot and the California Technology Council have partnered to bring you savings on all of these startup essentials and more, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. Insilico Medicine is working to harness artificial intelligence to address diseases of aging, and in the process, reinvent the way new drugs are discovered and developed. Its AI platform is integrated into the continuum of the discovery and development process and seeks to improve target identification, the selection of drug candidates, and predict clinical trial outcomes. In addition to working in collaboration with large pharmaceutical companies, Insilico is pursuing its own internal drug discovery programs in a range of diseases of aging. We spoke to Alex Zhavoronkov, CEO of Insilico Medicine, about the company's platform technology, the potential for AI to transform the discovery and development of drugs, and why Insilico focuses its efforts on diseases of aging. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
We're going to talk about Insilico Medicine, its efforts to use artificial intelligence to improve drug development and drug discovery, and why you think this approach may be able to tackle some of the most intractable disease areas by going after diseases of aging. Drug discovery and development remains a highly inefficient process that's often defined by failure. What's wrong with the way we discover and develop drugs today?
Well, there is lots of things that are wrong, and I guess firstly it would be worthwhile noting that there were many advances in artificial intelligence that transpired over the past few years. So essentially since 2014, the industry has changed beyond recognition, and just recently, so yesterday, the number one conference on machine learning called NIPS held in Canada this year was sold out faster than Burning Man. They sold out registrations in less than 15 minutes. So that area is becoming hot, and you see that there are really tangible advances in many areas of AI, including machine vision. So you now have superhuman accuracy in image recognition, in autonomous driving, in voice recognition, text recognition, and many other tasks. So now it's the time to put this technology to work for pharma. And the pharmaceutical R&D, as you correctly mentioned, is on the decline, and it's one of the most inefficient industries on the planet. And if you're thinking about the potential of AI in other industries, autonomous driving is going to be disruptive, but it's already disrupting an industry which is reasonably efficient. You always get from point A to point B with reasonable accuracy. But in the pharmaceutical R&D, you've got 90% failure rates and $2.6 billion in direct costs per drug. So it's clearly inefficient. And one of the reasons for this inefficiency is a lack of holistic approach to R&D. The development cycles are usually in decades. So you're talking about 6-7 years to develop a cancer drug from discovery to market. and sometimes longer, and that's for rare cancers, so where drug development is reasonably swift. And in some other disease areas, it's much longer, and it takes a very long time to go from hypothesis to market, and lots of things can fail. So at every step of the process. So at the hypothesis generation, you've got lots of academics with asymmetric knowledge and asymmetric data reporting their findings in many peer-reviewed journals. So sometimes you don't know who to trust, and the body of knowledge is growing, but it lacks clarity. Then if you move into the omics and the target identification, it's very difficult to identify relevant targets for specific diseases, and some diseases have more than one target. So most of the pharmaceutical R&D, I think, fails because the target associated with the disease is wrong. And then the next phase of the pharmaceutical R&D, where you are talking about developing great molecules or antibodies or other interventions for a specific target, that's where you can get it very wrong in terms of toxicity, in terms of side effects, in terms of the various properties of the molecule, and just sometimes the known chemical space is not enough to provide for efficient molecules for specific targets, for specific provide specific inhibitors. And then you move forward down the pharmaceutical R&D line, pipeline, and you go into, let's say, clinical trials. And in clinical trials, you need to account for the population differences, because every disease, most diseases are heterogeneous, and patients do not respond in the same way. The patients are different, their age is different, their gender is different. Nowadays we actually call it sex, not gender, because gender is optional. Their race is different, their diet is different. So it's very difficult to tailor a drug regimen for a specific patient at this point of time, right at the beginning of the drug discovery R&D cycle. And then when you are marketing this drug, usually you are marketing not to the same exact population that was participating in clinical trials, and sometimes drugs on the market do not work. So if you account the failure rate at every step of the pharmaceutical R&D, you get that 90% failure rate, or even more if you account for lack of real cures, even considering drugs on the market. So if most of our competitors, and actually most of the pharma companies who are involved in pharmaceutical R&D, they segment every one of those steps of pharmaceutical R&D in different pockets. So they compartmentalize R&D, and very few people have the holistic view on the entire process. So I think that's where AI can be very helpful, and you can do end-to-end learning nowadays to try to incorporate real-world insights right away into hypothesis generation, and also learn from chemistry into biology, and from biology into chemistry. And I think that's where AI can make major impact.
Insilico's not alone in seeking to harness artificial intelligence to improve the process of drug discovery. I want to dig down into the different aspects of your approach, but from a broad point of view, how does Insilico differ from others trying to do the same thing in terms of bringing AI into the drug development process?
So you would be surprised with how few companies actually are there who are really applying AI to drug discovery. So a lot of people who used to be doing Excel or very basic bioinformatics are now repositioning themselves as AI companies. And that was actually specifically true just a couple of years ago, when deep learning was very exotic and it was very difficult to find talent. So people started repositioning without having anything in hand to show for. And we were one of the first companies to enter this field with deep learning in mind. So we started doing deep learning in 2014. So my background is in GPU computing with ATI technologies, and many of my colleagues come from GPU computing and a GPU background, where we started applying deep learning on the omics data and then moved into chemistry. And now we have, I would call it a team, but it's really, I would say, a family of deep learning scientists. We have 27 deep learning scientists overall out of the 56 people globally. And we embrace that particular technology. So deep learning, reinforcement learning, next generation AI. And we also do not focus on just one specific task. So we don't just focus on compound binding or disease target association or digital medicine. We try to employ end-to-end learning. So our pipeline looks like a bunch of Lego blocks interconnected together, each one expanding with time, growing and learning. But it's always an interconnected pipeline, which looks at the real-world evidence, takes the insights back into hypothesis generation, and we started doing some really cool stuff with medicinal chemistry. So we were the first company to start applying generative adversarial networks, a really new flavor of AI and deep learning. That is basically commonly dubbed AI imagination. And we started generating novel molecular structures for specific molecules, for specific proteins, with specific molecular properties. So we can now design molecules de novo, completely outside of known chemical space and breaking most of the pharmaceutical companies' patents, with properties like solubility, bioavailability, half-time elimination time, blood-brain barrier, and specific inhibition of a specific protein target. And we can do multi-targeting compounds well using that novel technique. And we also moved to different representations of the molecular structure, both for the ligand and for the target. And now we can generate those novel molecules for targets that do not have crystal structure and do not have training sets where, some of the known chemistry has been shown to be effective inhibitors of a specific protein target. And also another differentiating factor is that we are focused on aging research, not for the purposes of making humans immortal or other kind of big claims. We are using aging research to look at biology in a very holistic way, to understand how the various biological processes change from young, middle-aged, old to very old patients, in order to tailor interventions for people of specific age, and we also identify molecules that potentiate vaccine response, potentiate response to IO, immuno-oncology, and help build biological age-adjusted clinical trials. And in general, deep learning allows you to, deep learning on aging allows you to capture a lot of biological relevant features from multiple data types, and you learn on age, and then you can relearn on specific diseases and identify targets that are relevant in both. So that's our primary modus operandi.
From a platform point of view, there seems to be three related thrusts to your platform to go from one end to the other. I'd like you to walk us through those three parts: target identification, small molecule leads and predicting clinical outcomes. What's the process, and what do you look at in each of these pieces? What are the inputs, and what are you able to do better?
So we think of ourselves as a deep learning pyramid, where you go from the hardware level into the data layer, and then into the library layer, and then into the service layer and application layer. And we sit primarily on the library level, where we build deep learning libraries for both biology, chemistry, and clinical trials outcomes predictors, and also real-world evidence gathering. So it's an end-to-end pipeline, which allows some deep learning scientists to write 2 pages of code to create molecules with specific molecular properties, or at the same time run a multi-omics analysis to identify relevant targets and identify most important features. And we work with multiple data types for target ID. So the primary data type and the most valuable data type that we focus on is transcriptomics and proteomics data, so gene expression, coming from multiple tissues and from multiple patient subpopulations, and also from cell lines. And we try to learn from transcriptional response data, coming from all kinds of high throughput experiments to understand what targets are most relevant to specific diseases or specific disease models. And we also employ pretty sophisticated dimensionality reduction tools, where we group genes and proteins into networks and look at the differential state change of those networks in time, but also between normal tissue and tissue afflicted by disease. So we build those disease signatures and then deconvolute them into targets. So where enough data is available. And where the data is sufficiently abundant, we also train deep neural networks on those pathways and pathway scores, and at the same time on individual genes. And we can combine it with methylation data and microRNA data. Sometimes we also include phenotypic data, and train the deep neural networks to predict, let's say, age or specific disease status or specific disease, or differentiation status of the cells if we're working on the cell level, and then extract the most relevant features and pathways back from those networks. So that's how we usually do target ID. And for the chemistry part of it, so where we identify novel molecules for specific protein targets that we identify in the target ID pipeline, we have the generative model that I've just described previously, where we pretty much imagine new molecular structures with specific properties for specific protein targets. Or we also mine the known chemical space and see what molecules have the highest probability of being good inhibitors or activators of a target protein, and at the same time possess certain favorable properties that make them good leads or hits or leads. And then we have another piece of the pipeline, so clinical trials outcomes predictors. It's a very venturous area, and I cannot make substantial claims to back some of my hypotheses that they work because it's very, very difficult to validate. And we see that sometimes people who are associated with a clinical study and the various properties around the people who are associated around the clinical study contribute more to the probability of the successful clinical outcome than the availability of the omics data or specific structural properties of the molecule or the various literature evidence that this molecule is likely to be successful in certain disease. So we mine, of course, literature, patents, and we also put a lot of emphasis on government grants. So we mine about $1.6 trillion of government grants from the early 90s to today, from European Commission, NIH, Australia and Canada, and also some Asian data to understand, where the trends are and to try to capture signals early. We also combine it with all kinds of published and publicly available data about the scientists who are involved with every one of those studies, and try to build knowledge graphs that help us get some signals about the possible success of a small molecule or a biologic in a certain stage of a clinical trial, and try to get the signals to the stage where they're more interpretable.
That seems to be one of the tempting aspects of AI, this ability to work with vast amounts of data to gain new insights, to tap data that may be unstructured. How do you know what data is meaningful from an input point of view?
So that's a great question, and most of the time this knowledge comes from experience. So we run a lot of experiments to see what data type might be more valuable, and also what combination of data types might be more valuable. And I think at this point of time, most of the AI teams are kind of scratching the surface of what we call live data economics, and also micro data economics, so data coming from chemistry and biology. And as more AI teams enter this area and start thinking about what data is more valuable for a specific application, we are likely to find out more about what data should be collected. I'll give you just one brief example. So sometimes people put a lot of emphasis and value on in genomics data, and sometimes pictures might be just very simple selfies, might be more informative than a genome, because from the picture you can derive age, sex, social status, body composition, and all kinds of, quality of the skin, sometimes the various genetic diseases. And with AI, it could be hugely accurate, but you cannot do that with a genome with the same level of accuracy. So for some applications, some data types are more relevant. And even though those data types are very cheap and abundant, but the combination of those data types might be extremely valuable, because if you combine a picture with a genome in large quantities, you can derive many more insights than just from pictures or just from genomes. And same is true for kind of micro data, where we derive data from cell line experiments and primary cell experiments or tissue biopsy experiments. And I think that right now the jury is still out what data is more relevant for target ID, because of course if you have a great protein target at hand for a specific disease that is validated, you are very likely to score a home run with a great pharmaceutical product. And for that, I think CRISPR screens are very important, combined with all kind of phenotypic assays, and combined with a lot of imaging data, organoid data, and of course body on the chip data. I think those data types are hugely valuable. I put much less emphasis on animal data.
As you mentioned earlier, Insilico is focused in the area of aging. Is there something about finding biomarkers or targets and drugs in this area that better lends itself to an AI approach? Is this just seen as an area of greater opportunity?
It's kind of a bit of both, but one important fact that we've discovered, which is pretty much a very low-hanging fruit and which is pretty obvious, is that age is the most abundant feature associated with pretty much every data type. So, my table has age, my computer has age, my friends have age, every patient has age, and it's reasonably easy to train deep neural nets to predict the age of the patient on various data types, and also various tissue-specific data types, disease-specific data types. And we usually start with an age predictor when we try to analyze the value of the data type. For example, if I cannot predict the person's age in a differential manner when I'm working with specific data, I feel that it's a little bit less valuable to me. Because if I train some of those predictors on very large data sets of gene expression data, for example, I capture a lot of biologically relevant features, and I can then retrain on much smaller subset of samples with a specific disease, and capture the features that are implicated specifically in a disease. And then I can derive those features using various machine learning techniques we've developed for feature extraction, feature importance, and feature selection. And aging is just one of the tools to aggregate multimodal data very efficiently, in addition to, of course, identifying the protein targets that are implicated in both aging and disease.
From a biological point of view, what is aging? What are the meaningful measures, and does altering those measures pharmaceutically translate into arresting the aging process? Will that help people stay young and healthy?
Well, this subject is great for PR and outreach, because people like to talk about all kinds of anti-aging miracles. But in reality, age again is it's a great feature to train deep neural nets on, to actually understand those complex biological processes. I think aging is perhaps one of the most complex biological processes out there, and it's hugely multifactorial and hugely diverse. So it's very difficult to even explain what aging is. There are hundreds of theories trying to do exactly that. So we try to be theory agnostic and think of aging just as one of the biological processes that we want to capture using deep neural nets and correlate it with disease. Of course, in one way, aging resembles disease, because we are likely to be significantly worse when we are in our 80s compared to ourselves in our 30s. So that differential drift sometimes is more harmful than many diseases. And of course, age is a major risk factor in most of the age-associated diseases and most diseases in general. So things break over time, damage is accumulating, the repair mechanisms are not ideal, so they miss all kinds of damage over time. There are lots of environmental factors that contribute to age. And just in general, most of the biological organisms are evolved to come to this life, reproduce, care for their young, and gracefully decline. So they are not built to last forever. And ideally, what we should be looking for is come up with an ideal age, an ideal health, in the ideal health state. So let's say 25 to 35 in the ideal health state for every individual. That would be the ideal biological state on every level, and we should look for changes away from this state into pathology and find ways to prevent those changes, either using pharmaceutical interventions or all kinds of other interventions that are available in our current toolkit or future toolkits. So I think the closer we are, and the closer we keep the patients to this 25 to 35 optimal health state, the less likely a person is going to develop any kind of disease.
What's the business model? I know Insilico has entered into a number of partnerships where a new company is formed. Is that the model? Is Insilico a service company? Is it licensing phase 1 ready drugs? Is the goal to build your own pipeline?
Well, to be absolutely honest with you, before last year we were hunting for a business model, so we were exploring the space, and recently we decided to develop a more firm approach to our business, and our business model is in licensing the disease target molecule associations to either small biotech companies or pharmaceutical companies, and the more confidence we get in those disease target molecule associations, the more we can ask for those therapeutic programs in terms of the upfront payment, milestones, and royalties. And so far, we started building this confidence internally and also externally, and people start partnering with us around those specific kind of bullets for the war on cancer, the war on Alzheimer's, ALS, and some rare diseases. So that's the primary business model. Of course, we also go from time to time for bounty hunting deals where pharmaceutical companies challenge us to a project and ask us to perform an impossible task. Usually it's an impossible task because it's been tried internally and it didn't work. And sometimes we agree to those projects where we get substantial bounty if we achieve certain milestones. So that's the kind of second business model, and it's almost an extension of the licensing of highly promising leads. We also have the forward-looking model where we develop consumer-facing applications like Young.ai that allow people to play around with their data in a fun and very engaging way, where we build age predictors that essentially give a prediction of the person's age at various levels using various data types, and people play with those tools. And as those tools mature, we're likely to launch them as separate apps that will be revenue generating.
I'd like to talk about one recent announcement, the deal you entered into with the Buck Institute on Aging and Luminescence to form a new company, Napa Therapeutics, which is going to develop novel drugs against aging-related targets. Napa is built around NAD metabolism on work done by Eric Verdin, the CEO of the Buck Institute. What is NAD metabolism, and what makes this a compelling area for targeting aging?
Well, there are actually several credible stories in aging research that popped up over the past decade. And, some of those stories are Senolytics, and, Unity Therapeutics was just recently formed out of the Buck Institute and went public. This company is looking to develop molecules that target senescent cells. And the second, I would say, most credible area of aging research that matured into credible drug development for specific diseases is NAD metabolism. So you can see that some of the molecules like nicotinamide riboside and nicotinamide mononucleotide that are also sold as supplements, you see some evidence that they are also implicated in certain diseases and in aging in general, in model organisms and already humans. So there is a lot of evidence pointing at NAD metabolism as a very promising area for age-related disease research. And just like with its analytics, the Bach Institute for Research on Aging is the world's epicenter for research and for commercialization opportunities. So the new CEO of the Bach Institute, Eric Verdin, I think his H-index, which is essentially the number of research papers with the same number of citations, is over 100. So he is an extremely established academic, and a substantial part of his career was spent on NAD metabolism. So that's why the press picked up on that particular aspect of our story. But of course, his lab covers a much broader spectrum of projects beyond NAD metabolism. And we cannot specifically disclose the target we're going after, but that target is directly or indirectly implicated in NAD metabolism and is probably around one of the top targets I've seen in my career, and I've seen a lot. So when we realized that Bach is partnering with Juvenescence, which is actually one of our investors and also an old collaborator, we have a joint venture with Juvenescence called Juvenescence AI, which is developing some of our compounds. When we saw that they're partnering around that particular target, we immediately decided to take part in this story because I think it's just too good to miss.
What will Insilico's role be within NAPA?
Well, we're a novel chemistry discovery company, so our role is to generate really highly potent molecules for a very, very promising target and a promising disease biology.
As you think about your work, what would you say the biggest challenge in getting all of this to come together and make a big leap forward on moving the needle on the time and cost of drug development is?
So I think that the major question there and major challenge is trust and validation. So it's very difficult to convince the pharma company and also the very established academic community that AI is the way to go. Most people who are not very familiar with both AI and biology and chemistry at the same time, they like to call this area as an overhyped area, and it's partially true. Again, primarily because of people who are using Excel previously rebranding as AI companies that cannot go beyond linear regression or some very traditional machine learning methods, or that are focused in specific silos. And there is still lack of trust in the pharmaceutical industry in AI techniques. So that's one problem. And the second problem is that instead of partnering with companies like ours, they're trying to grow internal expertise in AI. And I think no real serious AI scientist would go and work for a pharma company for a long time. Because even though they're claiming that they're open and you can get to work with a lot of data and that it's going to be an attractive salary, they cannot move as quickly as we are. And they cannot be as agile as smaller startups. And instead of partnering and experimenting, they are trying to go for very lengthy hiring cycles. They spend a year to hire somebody in machine learning, and sometimes fail just because people don't want to work for them, or sometimes go on a hiring spree and hire a lot of new grads and integrate them into their department. And some of those people leave very quickly. So I think that those two trends, so lack of trust and also focus on internal competencies, is a problem. And that's one of the reasons why I think that companies like Amazon or Alibaba or Tencent are going to be much bigger players in healthcare than the traditional pharmaceutical companies, just because you can already see they're much more agile and much more collaborative than the pharma companies.
Alex Zhavoronkov, CEO of Insilico Medicine. Alex, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.